It's another beautiful day on planet Earth. Welcome! Welcome to Waffle-Free Storytelling. It's Tina Konstant here and the jibber jabbers at the end. So we are leaping right into this week's story, which is called What Happened to Isaac Jak. Now, Isaac Jak lived in what most would call a mansion. There were 92 bedrooms and 32 living rooms, 4 kitchens, stables, outhouses, conservatories, gardens, and fields for as far as the eye could see. From the outside, most would call it beautiful. Now I say from the outside because no one ever got to step foot inside the Jak mansion. The gardens, though, were enough. They were maintained to the point that people often walked by just to cheer themselves up. People also walked by to try and catch a glimpse of Isaac Jak. But no one ever did, not since his brother had disappeared 5 years earlier. They were twins, you see, Isaac and Manya, and they were indistinguishable in every way except for their natures. Isaac was careful and precise, quiet and calm. Manya, he was riotous and hectic and messy and chaotic. Everyone knew when Manya had been and gone because he left madness in his wake. And everyone knew when Isaac had passed by because all of Manya's mess had been cleared up. As you can imagine, this caused some friction between the brothers, and they were often seen fighting. Isaac with his words, and Manya with his fists and pots and pans and hammers. The fights were always about who owned what, and always ended with Manya declaring that this town was his. Despite that, the Jak twins were almost always in each other's company, so much so that when people saw one, they always looked around for the other. So when the day came that the other one didn't appear, people began to ask questions. Their first question was, which one is missing? The fact that calm and quiet descended on the village told people that the maniac Manya had gone, and it was Isaac who remained. Well, the next questions naturally were all about this missing Manya. Where had he gone? Why had he gone? When was he coming back? Did the Jak brothers' fighting get so bad that Manya had no choice but to leave? These questions started out as whispers around the village, but the longer Manya stayed absent, the louder the questions got, until finally they weren't questions at all. They were rumors and they were accusations. The people who lived around the Jak mansion became convinced that Isaac, the quiet, introverted, thinking one, had murdered his brother, and that the wild and wonderful, eccentric Manya lay cold and dead in a grave in those beautiful gardens. The rumors and the accusations were spread so wide and so loud that the people of that village were determined to see justice done. And so the campaign to make Isaac Jak pay began. Isaac couldn't go anywhere without being chased and harassed and abused. The local sheriff made up a dozen crimes, from jaywalking to shoplifting, just to give him an excuse to arrest Isaac. The harassment was relentless. Even the children in the street were excused for picking up pebbles and throwing them at the man. But here's the thing. Isaac didn't say a word. He didn't complain. He didn't fight back. He didn't say or do anything to retaliate or even to defend himself. He just went about his business, tidying his garden and straightening anything that wasn't right, and keeping himself to himself like he had always done. A whole year passed, and the quest for justice did not abate. If anything, it got worse. People in the village would grin and declare that their efforts were wearing Isaac down. "He'll confess," they said. "Ha! He'll come clean and show us where his brother's body is buried." Sure that they were seeing cracks in Isaac's armor, the village increased their attacks until finally, 1 year, 3 months, and a day since Manya was last seen, Isaac Jak was witnessed packing his suitcase and leaving town. Now the village said they heard him mention that he was traveling south and would never be back. "We've won!" they declared, and were happy for that victory. If the village couldn't get justice for their favorite brother, then at least they would be rid of the other one. For a while, the people in that village were happy, until they walked past the mansion and looked over the fence and began to notice that bit by bit, those perfect gardens were in disarray. The weeds had grown into the hedges, the leaves lay scattered and rotting, the roots and vines tangled together in a way that made it impossible to tear them apart. The neighbors all agreed that the gardens were such a mess that it was almost as if Manya was back. They would laugh, and then they would quietly stop, because Manya, of course, was dead. They were sure of it. He had to be. It was why Isaac was run out of town. It was the sheriff's idea to open the gates to that great mansion and go inside. All they had to do was find Manya's body, and they would know that their suspicions about Isaac were right. Well, as you can imagine, it took no persuasion for the rest of the village to join in with shovels and sacks. The whole lot of them burst through the gates and spread across the grounds. "Look for a grave," the sheriff said, as they searched the attic and the basement, every room, the stables, the gardens, the outhouses, and the fields as far as the eye could see. But they found nothing. Not because there was nothing to find, but because every room in the grounds was so full of chaos and mess and clutter that it was impossible to search the place properly. More than one of the villagers said that they didn't dare go into certain rooms in case the stuff collapsed on their heads and killed them dead. They were just about to give up when 2 things happened almost at once. First, a child stumbled on a pile of dirt that he was sure looked like a body could be beneath it. Second was Manya, the town's favorite brother, the missing one, the wild one, shouting hello from an attic window. "Manya is back!" The people beamed. "We knew he would return." With a smile on his face and a broad hat on his head, yellow braces holding his trousers up and muddy mucky shoes, Manya Jak strode from his house, out the garden gates of his mansion, and sauntered into town. Everything he touched toppled over, everything he moved broke, and everything that was once straight ended up skew just because he walked by. People laughed, and they loved him for it, celebrating his return, and never once asking where he had been or why his brother hadn't mentioned that he'd just gone on an extended trip. "Isaac is taking a little holiday," was all Manya said. And completely forgetting the role that they played, the people in the village agreed that Isaac did indeed look a little pale and stressed before he left town. Manya was back. That was all that mattered. Manya was back. Well, with no one to tidy up or straighten after him, the chaos crept beyond the walls of the mansion and into the village. The pavements became blocked, hotels and pubs became inaccessible, and even the town square became so full of stuff that Manya was storing just for a little while, he had said, that soon there was no space for the people. After a while the village stopped gathering, and one by one families packed their bags, and they moved away. The moment one house was vacated, Manya would take it over and fill it up. I wonder what happened to Isaac Jak, people said as they left their homes in the village that they were born and raised in. It was the sheriff, who glanced over the garden wall on his way out of town. He looked at that pile of dirt that the child had found. By now it was so overgrown that it was almost indistinguishable from the rest of the mess. Indeed, he said, as he heaved his bags over his shoulders, what did happen to Isaac Jak? Well, that's a little weird one. Who's who? All right, my beautiful, spectacular, incredible human being, we are indeed in strange times. As always, go find the people you love, even if you feel there are arguments to be had. Patch things up and sort things out and have the conversations you've been wanting to have for a while. Most of all, oh gosh, you know what, for all the crazy, there are precious things in the world, so be in love with life. All right, I am going to see you next time, but before that, go and drop around to www.tinakonstant.com and pick up on all the other shenanigans. And I will see you next time for something weird, wild, and wonderful from Waffle-Free. Okay, bye-bye now.